everyone. Welcome to Empowering Exceptional Minds, the podcast diving into neurodiversity through real conversations with parents, individuals, and professionals on challenges, strengths, and unique experiences. I'm your host, Maayan Glazer-Koren, an educational therapist, ADHD educator, and ASD specialist. At Educational Therapy LLC, my private practice, we support kids and adults with executive function and learning differences toward confidence and independence. This podcast is a collaboration with Wiz Therapy, connecting individuals to providers and streamlining services for neurodiverse communities. Our goal is to share strategies, stories, and insights to empower families, educators, and professionals. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of this podcast or Wiz Therapy. The conversations here are for information and empowerment, not a substitute for professional or medical advice. And most importantly, if you are experiencing a mental health emergency, please dial 911 immediately, or you can text 741-741 to reach the crisis text line in the US for support. Hello to our listeners. I'm so delighted to welcome Jana Parker, an esteemed educational psychologist and the CEO and founder of Mind by Design. Jana brings a wealth of experience and deep passion to her work. She is a licensed educational psychologist, board-certified school neuropsychologist, and certified ADHD professional. With a career rooted in over a decade of work within public schools and special education systems, she now leads a multidisciplinary practice dedicated to helping children, teens, and families understand how they learn and what they need to thrive. Jana's mission goes beyond assessment. She empowers both students and caregivers with actionable insights, compassionate support, and strategies that translate into real-world success. She also leads Empower LEP, a platform that supports school psychologists making the transition into private practice, fostering community and professional growth. I am so thrilled to have her here with me today. She is my go-to to so many things, and she's not only my colleague, but she's also became a friend. Hey, Jana.
Hi.
Thank you for joining.
I'm so happy to be here.
We are giggling because we just talked, just like
about dogs.
Before we hit recording. So for our listeners, Jana and I have dogs that probably will not like each other if they will meet each other.
Yeah, we really want them to meet, but mine's a little reactive. He thinks he's big.
And that's the same for mine. So
yeah.
we might have a problem to solve, but we will do it at one day.
Well, like my trainer says, we can go on a walk side by side, kind of like across the street from each other, and then slowly get onto the same side of the street next to each other, walking in parallel. Yeah.
I did this before, also with other people. All right. So if you heard the introduction, then Jana is here because one, she is a colleague of mine, and I do love working with you, and I find your assessment extremely thorough, and I respect your work dearly. And I always ask it to my guests, what led you to become an educational psychologist?
Well, thank you for the kind words. And I feel the same way about you. I have the utmost confidence that if we send kids your way, you are going to take very good care of them. And I really appreciate just you being a trusted colleague and a community partner. So thank you to you too.
Oh.
What brought me to educational psychology? Well, I was originally in school to be a clinical psychologist, and I realized that I felt a little too limited in terms of like I knew I loved psychology. I knew I wanted to be in the field. I had majored in it in college, And I went right into grad school after college because I didn't know what else to do with myself because I wasn't sure what you were supposed to do except school because that's all I had really ever done. So I'm like, yeah, I'll just keep going back to school. But clinical psychology was not for me. I didn't want to be a therapist, and I didn't know about testing when I was in that program. So, do I wish I had continued on with that and gotten a doctorate? Probably. Like in retrospect, I would have appreciated a doctorate, but I wasn't ready at the time in my early 20s to be in that program. And I also thought that all you could do with the clinical psychology degree was be a therapist. And I realized while in the program, that wasn't what I wanted to be because my experience with that so far had been limited to school counseling. And I felt like in being a school counselor, I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough influence over the students' environment, or I wasn't part of a team really. I was just kind of doing counseling in an office for a half an hour and then sending the kid back into their school day. And I just didn't feel like I could be as effective as I wanted to be there. But I did learn about school psychology while I was working at a school. And I was like, ooh, that's what I want to do. I want to be part of the team that figures out what's going on with the kid. I want to try to do it early on. Or if we get them later, I just want to try to figure out what's going on and how do we help, and then have a team around the student who can do that. So I was a school psychologist for a very long time. And then I was in administration in a public school. And I also worked part time in private practice. And I realized that my calling was really in the private sector where I felt like I could have more of I could have more flexibility and more time in an evaluation. I didn't feel as rushed. I didn't feel as stuck with boundaries of ed code that you get in schools. And I didn't feel as stuck to what could or couldn't be done for a student. Like in a private evaluation, I can give whatever recommendations I think are going to be most useful. And there's no one telling me, like, oh, you can't talk about medicine, or oh, you can't talk about this specific kind of literacy intervention. It's more what I think, my professional opinion is what I say to the families, and then I highly encourage and I try to make happen those next steps because the evaluation is only as good as what you do with that new information. And so I have loved being a private practice educational psychologist, and I have loved training my team who has come on staff with me to be this same, kind of support for our community through evaluation and then through intervention.
I'm gonna say something personal, but not too personal.
Okay.
So I know you since you were like really in this transition phase. This is where we kind of got to know each other. You were like in between, still thinking, and I don't even remember where we met. I think it was something online because it was during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
And um, and then it was really interesting to see how you kind of held yourself also, but also how much I think impact you do right now when you took it on to a private practice. And I'm not going to get to the politics of the system and educational system and what's going on and what needs to be changed because we both know, and everybody that is coming here as a guest know that we talk about it a lot about the challenges that we deal with the education system. But I do have follow-up questions. One of them is when you get that first phone call intake, because many times parents reach out and they ask us, well, the school is going to do an evaluation, like an educational, educational evaluation. So what is the difference between what you do versus the school and neuroevaluation?
Oh, it's such a good question. It's such a good question, and everybody has would probably give you kind of a different answer. I'm going to give you mine based on my understanding and also tell you kind of an anecdotal funny story I heard just the other day. Because the other day, well, I guess I'll start with this. So the other day, I was speaking with another close colleague of mine who I've known for a very, very long time, who does something similar to what you do. And she said, sometimes it's hard to say to a family, you should go see an educational psychologist because their question is, what is the difference between what you do and what they would get at the school if your training is in school psychology?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is so interesting because, and I can totally understand that because I was a school psychologist. I was a school psychologist, but so the training that school psychologists get, I actually think puts us at a significant advantage in a lot of ways for doing private practice psychoeducational evaluations. We are trained, and all of our training is at schools where we see the landscape of what's going on. We see curriculum, we see interventions happening, we see IEP development, we see the kids across uh, uh, the school's lifespan, the lifespan of the kid at that school, right? Depending on how many years we're there, we see them year after year. We go to their meetings year after year. We see the progression or the lack thereof. We understand the kinds of things that can happen in a classroom, things that people say might be happening in a classroom, and see where there's a, a discrepancy between what people are saying is happening and what is actually happening, or just all those little nuances where we speak the language of education. Now, every school psychologist is going to do that a little bit differently and have different experiences within their training and their background. Some are going to be more into the mental health aspect. Some are going to be more on the preventative side. Some are going to be doing counseling. Some are going to be very into assessment. It also depends on where you spend your professional development hours. Are you going to do more training in therapeutic techniques? Are you going to do more training in ADHD, in dyslexia, in uh, trauma? There are so many different directions that you can really kind of focus as a school psychologist. But as a school psychologist, you really get whatever comes across your desk, whether it be learning, behavior, emotional trauma, anything. You see everything. And so I think it's an excellent training ground to get the gamut and have had exposure to all of that and have had to deal with all of it, no matter what it was that came your way. When we transition into private practice, we get to be a little bit more specialized in what we feel like is our niche. So now instead of just doing everything because you have to, because that's your job in a school district, you now get to say, you know what, this is where, I mean, maybe you're a generalist, but maybe you're like, I have done a lot of extra training in a certain area, and these are the kinds of evaluations that I like to do. And if I have a team, so if something comes my way, this just happened the other day, something came my way that was much more mental health related. And I was like, that's not actually what I do best, but I have a team member who does. So I'm going to actually transition this assessment over so that we can do the work that we have, had more experience in. This is kind of a long way to say, when I started out in my training as an educational psychologist, I worked for a clinical practice in the area that was, and the owner is a doctor. So he is a developmental pediatrician, and I worked there for almost 7 years, learning more about clinical practice. So it was like I had another training ground because I didn't feel 100%, I guess maybe experienced or stable in my ability to look at a case more clinically rather than educationally, right? Because as we make the shift, we're no longer looking at ed code, we're looking at DSM diagnosing.
Right.
And I had a very clinically based master's program that I went to for school psychology, and our entire first year was with the MFT program. So our training, our foundation was very clinically based, but I needed to kind of like relearn, and I went to trainings and I then learned from other professionals. So I was working within that practice. I think that sometimes educational psychologists who are starting out on their own, and I also have a business where I support educational psychologists going out on their own. Sometimes they are literally, I was going to say legitimately and literally, they are literally on their own potentially. And I always tell people, hey, you might want to get some mentoring. You might want to get some supervision, some consultation. It's not like official because if you earn your license, you have your license, you can just go out and do things, right? But just because you have your license doesn't mean you have experience. So
Yeah.
I do think that there are people who are educational psychologists who are just starting out who don't have a lot of support around them to know whether or not they're doing any kind of different work than what they're doing in schools. And so I try to help people do that. But that's what I do with my team when they come on board, right? So I had 7 years of this before I started my practice by myself. And now, as I bring educational psychologists onto my team, that's what they get from me when we work together. So we are like casing kids. We're consulting on cases. We're like talking about all the things related to clinical practice, and it helps us all grow and learn from each other. And I'm also, you have to get 36 hours of continuing education to keep your license every 2 years, which is a lot of training, right? So,
Yeah.
there is continued education, but there really is something to the practice of educational psychology that is different than school psychology. And so, what I would say is that the biggest difference is in schools, you are looking at ed code and you are saying whether or not a student is eligible for special education services. That is the core goal of the school's evaluation. If you come to private practice with an educational psychologist, they're going to have all that knowledge, but they're going to be looking at the case, or they should be looking at the case from a clinical perspective and going deeper into, well, and again, this is just my perspective, but going deeper into, and this is what we do, um, what is the referral concern? Not is a student eligible or not, but what's the referral concern? What is happening that this student isn't somehow being as successful as they want to be, or as we would like them to be? Or why? What is happening where they're not as successful as they need to be at school for whatever reason? That could be academic, it could be social, it could be behavioral. It could be trauma. What is getting in their way of them being more successful as a learner, as a student? And so that's the referral question that we get. That's what we're trying to answer. And then what can we find out through our evaluation that's going to help us answer those questions and then make recommendations that are going to be useful for the family, for the educators, and I mean, there's never a time for me when I'm like, okay, I've learned enough. I'm done learning. I'm like always trying to, I'm amending a report right now, or not amending. I'm doing an addendum to a report right now that I'm off on a tangent now, but this is what I've been working on today. I'm doing an addendum to a report because of my new understanding of the 2025 dyslexia definition that
Yeah.
just
They
came
change
out.
it. Yeah. Hmm.
And I want I'm not changing my DSM diagnoses, but the DSM diagnosis of specific reading disorder and the international dyslexia definition are different. And sometimes that is very confusing to families. And
Yes.
so I want people to kind of come away with both. Like, even if I'm not calling this specific learning disorder in reading, it doesn't mean that they don't have dyslexia.
Hmm.
And that's a hard conversation to have. It's weird. And it makes me question every day, like, uh, we started working on the DSM-5 TR, I think in 2013. So it's been a long time. It's been 12 years since then. And so how are we still functioning off of this very old definition of specific learning disorder, right? So anyway, that's a total tangent, but you're going to have so many follow-up questions for me. Okay, so the difference, I'm bringing you back. So the difference is schools are looking at ed code and determining whether or not a student is eligible for special education. Educational psychologists should have a deeper clinical understanding of what that looks like why a student isn't able to be achieve educationally for whatever reason, and how do we help it. And a neuropsychologist or a clinical psychologist are probably looking at things very similarly, right, to an educational psychologist, but they've had different training and a different training ground. So they might have been in a hospital setting. They may have been in a school setting, but they've done a lot of training, but sometimes they haven't even done a lot of training in testing. They've done training in other things, and then they've decided that they want to go into assessment. Or some of them have done a ton of training in assessment, but that doesn't mean that they've worked in schools. So I think, and they look at a neuropsychologist will be looking at things from a brain-based behavioral perspective, which is similar to how an educational psychologist who's also been trained in in neuropsychology is going to look at things. But the training ground is and setting are different, and so I think it's a lot about asking questions of, why would that we're all qualified to do it. It's just different perspectives. For example, I have a clinical psychologist on staff with me who has a ton of experience in complex mental health, right? And I would send someone who came to me with complex mental health without her on staff, I might have referred out. But now that she's here, I'm like, great, I've got somebody on staff who can do this, right? Because we don't want to take on something that doesn't feel like it's within our wheelhouse. And educational psychologists are really supposed to be looking at cases based on a referral question that has something to do with education. Whereas a clinical psychologist is, when they get an evaluation, they are trained to look at like the entire thing.
That's a good, like, I would say, I don't know if definition is the right word, but that's good, like to understand, for our listeners to understand what is the difference. And I have to say, as a parent, and I'm sure you saw that in your practice as well, it's so confusing. Like you see your child is not doing well and you're like, what am I doing next? And then you have, okay, I'm going to apply for an IEP, and then that is when I said, and I understand what you said. I wanted to go back to your attention because, and also just to our listener, that the definition, and I spoke about it in our previous podcast that I had with Dr. Sandman Hurley, is that
it was great, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah,
she's fantastic. We talked about the challenges that we have now with the definition that was just changed, and my concern is that it's going to affect services, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I don't know if it will. I don't know if it will make kids get more services, but just to say, like, I just want to bring an example so it kind of help with your attention as well, that sometimes, and it also will relate to the question, what is the difference? So I remember working with clients back then. It was he was in third grade. The assessment was not done until he was in fifth grade because of COVID. I did assessment in my backyard, and academic assessment, and I saw signs for dyslexia, though I'm not gonna say dyslexia. I see signs of it, and we needed an IEP for him. Of course, nothing happened until he was in fifth grade, and we started the IEP process. While we were doing this too, I also referred to to an educational psychologist, and kind of similar to the line that you are working at. And they concluded that he's dyslexic, ADHD, and dysgraphic with the DSM-5 diagnosis. Now, because the kid was getting services from me for about 2 years before he got an IEP, he held his head, kind of above water, but not completely above. Like, I made sure he doesn't sink. So, but he still needs services because I saw him for, maybe twice a week. He needed like those minutes to start ticking and get more services. And what happened with that is that the school with the IEP, the kid was only, you know what I'm gonna say, because I see
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, I see where it's going.
I
It
know
was
exactly.
he was only 6 months behind. And with that in mind, even with the IE or the IE for our listeners, like an outside evaluation that you bring to the school, but when you apply for an IP, the school still need to do their own. So your child is actually getting another evaluation done. And with that, he was not found eligible. And this is where we say, wait a minute, but my child is dyslexic, is ADHD, is dysgraphic. Why doesn't he get services? So Jana, can you help our listener to understand what is happening? And just to know, because this is audio, Jana is like not doing well right now. She wants to kind of
Pulling my hair out.
she's pulling her hair out. She looks in distress. Just kidding. But yeah.
Yeah, what's happening? What's happening is the there has to be like there's like two prongs to special education eligibility. One is that there's a disability. Two is that there is a need for special education services because they're not making, adequate educational progress. There really is no specific bar that you have to be meeting in order to meet that criteria. I mean, well, that also depends on the district. So districts are using different methods to determine whether or not a student is eligible. One is a discrepancy model where they'll say like, unless there is like a 22.5 point difference between cognitive abilities and whatever area of academic achievement this is, they don't qualify, which is totally archaic and does not make any sense. Yep. There's also a pattern of strengths and weaknesses, which can be it's kind of loose, which I like. I mean, I like that, but I like it in the way that there's a lot of ways to defend why a student would need special education. And then there are also ways that you can defend that they wouldn't. And there's not really a hard line anywhere. So it's really kind of where the school's IEP team, which are all different based on, people with all different kinds of experience, and whether the goal is to try to get kids in or try to keep kids out, how big are the school's caseloads? Like, it's never supposed to have anything to do with that. And a lot of times I'll say this, like, as a school psychologist, you kind of get into like oh, I can't find a processing deficit, or, oh, it's just not low enough, or, you know what? He's still functioning within the average range, right? He's, maybe he's dyslexic, but he's still functioning within the average range. And then you think as a school person, like, well, what are we going to give him if what are we going to give him if he qualifies? What's that going to look like? And then there's well, okay, well, maybe he'll get resource. Well, okay, if he gets resource, is it more beneficial for him to get pulled out to have resource? Or is it more beneficial for him to access the curriculum in his classroom? Mm-hmm. Is it going to be more detrimental to him emotionally and even academically if he's missing part of class to come to the resource room? And then what's that resource teacher actually doing? Is that resource teacher doing a structured literacy program? Are they doing a specific program that isn't actually a good match for whatever it is that this kid needs. How many different kinds of reading problems do the 8 kids in the resource room at that time have? And does the teacher have any idea how to teach reading, or have they been trained? Or have, do they know how to tell their aides who are also teaching those kids how to provide the curriculum? Like, is there, I mean, I just went way off on a tangent there,
No,
but
it's
those are the kinds of things
important.
that happen.
Because, I don't think about these things when I am, sitting in those meetings. I'm thinking how the best I can advocate for my client to
Mm-hmm.
get services. At this specific case, both the educational psychologist and myself told parents, you need to get an advocate, because the only reason he is, can do things is because he's working. So he's actually getting special ed services from me,
Right.
right? Just to our listener, people, our my goal is to be out of a job with this.
Yeah.
I want everybody to get the services. Um, so it's not, don't get me wrong, I do want to make money and I need to survive in this world. But we don't want to see kids, when they are really struggling, and that it gets into like the politics, and the person who is really get hurt is the kid,
Yeah.
from this entire situation. Um, and this is where I'm like, yeah, this is what is happening. And he never got the services. We did it, the parents did it, they could have afford out of pocket, but not everybody can afford out of pocket services.
Right. And that is whenever a student is getting a significant amount of support outside of school. If you're a parent listening right now and this is happening to you and you're going through an evaluation process, you really need to pull that interventionist in to the process, to the assessment process, so that
Absolutely.
uh, the school knows how much support the student is getting, because that absolutely affects. I mean, because yeah, we don't want kids to fail. So if you're taking forever to go through an IEP process and the intervention in the interim is kind of filling the gap, right? What we're trying to do is transition the services into back to the school, and we have to show like they've been getting so much outside of school. So then some people would say like, well, just stop doing the services so that they don't
What, fail?
show as well. Right. It's ridiculous. Of course you're not going to do that.
No.
No. So that's if somebody is getting an evaluation, I would absolutely say, um, you know, try be very clear about how much support the student is already getting and why they're being as successful as they are, and maybe even where the data from where they started and where they are and how much intervention that took. Not even just how much, but what the quality of it as well. And I would
I
also, oh,
Yeah, go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead. I was going to say that the other thing that I would suggest is if we get a call and we think that a student is probably going to need an IEP, because sometimes we can't tell, right? Sometimes, like everybody is always, they can always go to the school to ask for an evaluation. Um, and sometimes parents just don't want to do that, right? Because they know, like, number one, they don't think that they're necessarily looking for or their student might be eligible for special education services, because again, the bar can be pretty high. But they also, so there's that. And then there's also, I just lost that train of thought, but I know what I'm trying to say. That if we get a case in that as we're starting out, we think, and this happened with a family who I think you know who I'm talking about, because I was working with another one of your colleagues on this family. When we think, you know what, this needs to go to the school, like they need to have an evaluation, the student needs to have an evaluation through the school, I would stop and I'd say, you need to go to the school and do this first, because they're going to need to do what they're going to do anyway.
That's right.
And so and then I say, if that assessment doesn't give you the information that you need, or there's any kind of like issue there, or you don't agree with something, then you can ask them to pay for an independent educational evaluation, and then we can do it. And I mean, I really try to give the schools the benefit of the doubt, like I
Yeah.
want them to do the right thing. I am an advocate for public school. Like that's my training ground. I think that they can do really, really good work. And I just always think, like fingers crossed, I hope this person who this assessment is going to do a good job and see what I see even just from not even yet evaluating the student. And then you have kind of more to go off of. So if you come in with an assessment and you say we want an IEP, I feel like you're in a less advantageous position than if you go to the school and the school says, okay, yes, IEP or no IEP, and then you can um, ask for a second opinion at no cost.
Yeah. So that's like flipping it. So do it the other way around. Start from the school and then if needed, get an IE.
Yeah, yeah,
And also just to kind of add on to what you said about bring the team that give services, absolutely. Because if you have a multidisciplinary model of support that you give for if, let's say your child has a speech and language pathologist that work with them, an occupational therapist, and maybe dyslexia mediation, maybe dyslexia specialist, um, or not, or not have dyslexia remediation, but we're looking on dyslexia, then definitely bring these two to a meeting or have them write a report with some data to show, like you said, here's where we started, here's where the child is now. If we're looking on, ADHD or any kind of developmental challenges, if the kid is on medication or not, you have to bring that into the mix as well. One of the things that I notice, it's sometimes it's interesting because I was just in an IP this week, and one of my question was the kid was on medication when you guys did the assessment because that's an ADHD kid, and also have the understanding that these meds exist for specific reasons, and if we take this away, they will perform differently. So this is something to keep in mind, to have as much data as possible.
absolutely.
All work for you. So I want to kind of circle back and ask you, so when when you have the intake phone call, what are the steps that the families will go through when they are first contacting your office, right? And what goal is each step?
Yeah. So when they're coming to my practice specifically,
Yeah, what do they go through?
so they speak to my practice manager. She answers the phone. And she, is local. She's here. She's so that's all. That's nice too. Um, and she asks a lot of questions. She really tries to get people on the phone. I mean, because people can like try emailing and stuff, like, oh, do you have availability? We get things like, oh, do you have availability? Or like, how much is it? Or, but what before we even answer those kinds of logistical questions, we want to know if we're a good fit for them, like, and we want to hear what they're looking for and see if what they're looking for, if we think we can match it with a service that we have. And she's really like, I've trained her to ask questions that are going to, even a parent might not know what it is that they need. They might be
Right.
like, well, we might need, she's struggling with reading, but we're not really sure. And she's been seeing so and so, or she has intervention at school, but we don't know. We might need an assessment. And so we really try to ask clarifying questions that help us understand what the problems are. Like, what are they concerned about? And then, because we have kind of like um, kind of a menu of options, she's trying to figure out what that is. I mean, if you are a student who's struggling with reading and you've never had intervention, that's the first piece. It's not assessment, it's intervention, right? So someone may be saying we need an assessment, but if the kid is 6 and they've never had intervention, we would like to try a little bit of that first, whether it's here or somewhere else or at school. What are they doing at school? Are they in a tier 2 intervention? Have they been flagged at school for anything? So we're just asking a lot of clarifying questions to really try to understand and see if, and then she's trying to make sense of, is what they're saying, does that meet the need that can we meet those needs, and what service is it through? And sometimes it's very clear and she doesn't have any questions about that. And so she gives some recommendations or some options of like, this is what it can do, because we have intervention services and assessment services.
Right.
And we even have just like parent clarification services, and I know you do meetings like this too, where a family's just like, we're not even really sure what we need. And like, we would like to consult with a professional, not just like the practice manager, but a professional about what our options even are. So that's like
Right.
a consultation meeting. And, or we have an IEP, but we're not sure it's doing enough, or we're not, can you take a look at this assessment? We're not sure if we need something else. Like, so we will sometimes just do, and we love those kinds of meetings, where we take a look at what's going on. And then so that's a person who's been in the school system for a very long time, who understands all of those aspects and can give an informed uh, recommendation about what are the right next steps, right? So if it feels like the parents have more questions and want to know more and want to have a meeting with one of my psychologists or me, they can do that. And then if we do end up going toward assessment, then that just goes toward the assessment, right? But it could be that we're recommending something else, whether it's in our practice or it's out in the community, or it's going back to the school. And then we're like, okay, and then if you need us again, come back, right? Um, but also, one of my other psychologists is uh, she's basically the next step in if my practice manager has questions that she doesn't feel as equipped to answer, then she takes all the information and she brings it either to my psychologist, like my head psychologist, or she brings it to my director of educational support services, who you also know, if it's an intervention question. So you have like other professionals that are not just the practice manager. So me or the two others can help answer questions and even get on the phone with the family to kind of talk out those first little bit to try to get more clarification or really understand the situation. So all in all, we're really like, that's kind of the initial experience that a family gets. And then we decide, okay, this is how we're going to move forward. And then they get connected, they get into our like EHR, our like client portal. And then they either do the intake with their psychologist, who we've kind of chosen based on kind of area of focus, as well as availability. So like, when does the family want it? Who's available? But my staff are all like highly skilled, but we might put a case with a specific psychologist just based on like kind of their area of expertise, and what the family's coming in with. Or if it's intervention, they go through an intake process with their interventionist, a little informal kind of assessment, phone call with a parent, little assessment with the student to really understand like what are the needs, what's the baseline, where are they starting from, and create a learning plan. So,
Okay, that's very thorough. Now, I
yeah.
do have a question about what I wanted to ask. Do-do-do-do-do-do. I forgot my train of thought now. Darn it.
Happens.
It happens. It's okay. Um, yeah. Oh, I remember what I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
With your practice, you guys, I know that your area of expertise is like a really kind of niche, is like focusing on dyslexia. And that was something that, and I go to repeat it over and over again, is especially with older kids, I get a lot of like late diagnoses recently, especially when it comes to being in middle school or even, ninth grade, high school. So I want to ask you about, first, how long does it take to get through evaluations? And second is, what do we do with services when, the brain is pruning and we're kind of thinking about goals for these teens?
Specifically related to dyslexia.
Late diagnosis of dyslexia. What do we
Yeah.
do? Because this is not severe enough and they are not in kindergarten anymore. So
Right.
let's be clear. I'm putting all the cards on the table, that they will need more practices and it might not be efficient because of their time also. If they're athletes or, they have other things, it might not have a buy-in.
Yeah. Well, this it's a great question. And yeah, I mean, I love dyslexia assessments, definitely my niche. And I'm thinking specifically, just a case came to mind of a kid who I tested maybe 2 years ago, but I think about him all the time. He was in 11th grade at a very high achieving private school in our area, and he had already been evaluated and he got a diagnosis of ADHD, but not of dyslexia. And when I looked at that assessment, really everything that the psychologist previously had done did come out pretty average. So it didn't look like it didn't look like he had dyslexia. But I also think that dyslexia assessment, I don't know, even 5 years ago, even in 2020, let's say like 2018 to 2020, dyslexia assessment, even then, doesn't look, at least for me, like it looks now.
I
There's,
agree.
yeah, there's
I
so
feel,
much more.
yeah, the orthographic processing is a piece that I feel like these are the kids that are maybe it's like you said, average. Phonemic awareness is fine,
Yeah,
but the orthographic is
right. And this kid, when you gave him a gort, I mean, the mom could not, and he could not understand why it was taking him so long to get through his homework. And he was trying so hard and it was taking him so long. And then he was exhausted and he was feeling bad about himself and all the things. And yeah, I mean, his reading was not fluent at all. So on top of the ADHD, like he also had those issues which were not caught in the first evaluation. So it was much more apparent in the second evaluation, and because of the assessment tools that I used and just a deeper understanding of how dyslexia shows up. And so that, I think, just kind of back to your first question about like what are the differences between like different kinds of psychologists doing assessment. It really even just depends on, regardless of what kind of evaluator they are, like how into a specific kind of assessment are they, and like how deep do they go? And that's what I train school psychologists at our state and national conferences on how to really align their assessment with the aspects that we look at for based on the science of reading, rather than eligibility for special ed. I mean, that's what they have to do, but like the assessments should always inform intervention. So,
yeah.
but they don't always, right? So I think dyslexia assessment now has to be a lot more than just like they have dyslexia. Ding. I mean, it's not, it can be so much more. And so that's really what we try to do. So to answer your question, what do you do with a student like that? At the older ages, yeah, if there's not buy-in for uh, practicing reading with a specialist who knows what they need to practice and how they need to learn, or what they need to learn, and they might not have time for that, then it's a lot about accommodations and making sure that they know how to use them, and that they, which also takes, I think, a specialist to help them learn how to use accommodations effectively. You
Right.
can't just be like, oh, use your speech to text or use the audio, blah blah blah. You have to actually practice that with somebody, or the kid is not going to do it.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, there's
sometimes even with speech, sorry that I'm cutting you off, even
that's
with
what I
speech to text, I had my client yesterday told me, I said, do you use your speech to text accommodation? He goes, no, it's too loud in the classroom. It doesn't catch it. And I'm like, oh boy.
right. You have to have somebody kind of helping you figure out what you're going to use and how you're going to use it, because you have to become an expert in that in order for it to work for you. It's not just like here's your list of general accommodations, use them. You have to know how. I'm thinking of another kid right now who is very close to me, complaining about not in high school not being able to read like the science text and understand it. And I'm thinking, well, I don't actually remember the last time this person picked up a book. I mean, how long has it been since you've actually practiced reading? That's a huge problem, I think. Like, I don't even know how this is like a, what's it called? Like, I can't think of the word right now, but like a very big problem that is not going to have an answer right now. But kids aren't reading anymore.
No.
So they're not getting a lot of practice. And their attention is awful because they're just looking at quick reels all day and fast technology and very few words. And they wonder why they're having trouble paying attention to what they're reading and reading. So I don't know, is that dyslexia or is that I haven't practiced reading in a long time and I don't really have the attention for it?
It's really interesting what you say, because I had a client yesterday. We were sitting here, we were talking, and he's an eighth grader. And I had to explain to him what is the difference between deep reading and because I love it to do like, yeah, because they don't really understand. There is a great book, Readers Come Home. I think
Yeah,
Sharon
I
Wolf.
was going to say, have you read that?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
And she made me think about so many things when it
Uh-huh.
comes to reading. I don't say that everything needs to be, we actually had a study group even on this book with my colleagues, but it doesn't mean that you have to do deep reading for everything. But there are things that you really need to kind of stop. And this is the metacognitive piece, right? You need to stop, you need to read, and you need to ask yourself, did I understand what I just read? And if not, what do I need to do to help
Hmm.
myself?
Right.
And to talk about accommodations for the dyslexia piece is this is the time also to add the audiobooks, because honestly audiobooks are great for vocabulary, for syntax, for listening comprehension. So there are so many things you can do, um, and even if you didn't pick up a book, do you even listen to language?
Right. Yes. And audiobooks with no distractions.
Yeah.
So if you are really trying to listen to something, because I am a great auditory learner, I am
Yeah, me
great.
too.
Like I don't even need to watch something. Like I watched or listened to the whole dyslexia presentation actually this morning. Did you watch that? The International Dyslexia Association from, I want to say like Georgia. They had, I'll send you the YouTube. They had like uh, two, I, I'm blanking on the names, and this is so embarrassing right now that I'm blanking on the names, but I just can't think of it off the top of my head. But they were talking about the development of the new definition of dyslexia and like how it came about and all of the like the people who participated and what went into it and then really went through describing the definition. And so I will send that to you.
Thank you. We'll
Um,
put it in the
yeah,
podcast too.
yeah. Because it was, you know what? Hold on. I'm just going to pull it up right now because it's important. So hold on. Um, but my point was, as I'm listening to it, I don't need to look at it too, right? I don't need to watch. However, there are times when you're listening where you realize you were just thinking about something else.
Yeah.
Your mind went somewhere else, or you opened your email and and I even just like deleted some junk mail. Even just going in and being like, okay, I can listen to this and I can also delete junk mail at the same time. No,
No.
no, you can't. You cannot multitask your brain. If you are paying attention to one thing, you are not paying attention to the other thing. So My point is, yes, the use of audiobooks and while not literally not being distracted by anything else. So there are very few things that I can do while I'm listening to something. I cook something that I don't need to use my brain for, not follow a recipe, but I can like make eggs. I can do the dishes. I can fold laundry. I can go on a walk.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's what
I
I do.
can't do anything else if I really want to listen to something. And in fact, I will like listen to something and go on a walk, and not have to watch it, but I will be able to like focus and take it in better if I am just moving and walking. So I think these are the kinds of things that I say to kids and families when we're talking about accommodations and how they learn best. You have to know how it is that you learn best and make sure that you are actually participating in doing that and not other things. Or it doesn't matter if you have the audiobook or not. If you're also playing a video game while you're listening to your audiobook, it's not gonna, you're not gonna learn it.
No, it's not. Jenna, we need to finish up, but
Oh
what do
my
you want?
gosh.
You had fun. I had fun.
I
We
did.
had fun. We
I
can make a
know.
song. What do you want our listener to take away from this conversation?
Gosh, I feel like we were everywhere with it. What do I want them to take away? Okay, so if we're talking about parents, if you have a child that you know like there's something going on and you want to try to figure out what it is. I mean, I guess at this point you could ask ChatGPT, but ChatGPT isn't going to have like the human touch and connection that people have who have been working in this field for a long time and who kind of like live, eat, breathe, sleep this kind of stuff. Um, so if you can find somebody qualified, because there are a lot of kind of people who think they're qualified out there, but might not necessarily be, who can just help you figure out the next best step. So maybe that's a tutor, maybe it's an interventionist, maybe it's an educational psychologist, maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's somebody at the school, but like, don't try to do it alone. Try to find someone who can help you just figure out just the next best step. Um, and do a lot of like question asking. And, don't people in this field too really like to help. So usually if you ask, you're not going to get like, oh, I can't believe that person doesn't want to help me. I mean, we want to help. That's like the whole thing. We want to help and we have a lot of knowledge. I've always thought this kind of like consultative service should be available to people in big companies. What is that called? Like EAP or something? EAP? When like a big company is like, we have these services for you. You
Like
could get
benefits,
legal guidance.
employee
Yeah,
benefits.
like that. If somehow parents could get answers and help for their kids who are struggling in school, even just like on an hourly basis of let me just help to ease your anxiety about this so that you don't go down a Google rabbit hole and waste all your productivity time at work because you're anxious about your struggling child. Like that's what our society needs to do. But as a person, like instead of kind of ruminating on it and doing research and wondering, like really try to reach out and talk to professionals who can help you. Because it might cost a little bit of money, but it also may be exactly what you need to take some forward steps. Because again, like an evaluation is only as good as what you do after it, and the intervention is only as good as the interventionist's skills and the relationship between the family and the kid and that interventionist. That's really important, the skills and the relationship. So I think that's what I would take away from this talk.
I love it. This is spot on. Relationships are so important. Jenna, thank you so much for coming today.
You're welcome. Can we do it again?